right. I want to just give some backstory to Dave and I. We'll meet in person for the first time, but we've been hanging out since COVID started. I think the very first event was probably end of 20, maybe thereabouts.
Yeah.
David and I met indirectly through Ed Milet. After I heard David on his show, David has been a high performance NBA coach, working with people making lots of money and improving their performance, and wrote 2 awesome books that you can see beside him. I love that. I told my wife I got to get that from my office up in Vermont. Pivot and Go and Breakthrough. We've got some left of his books, and those of you that attend the event, maybe perhaps hint you might get a copy as they last, and he'll be there with you. David's also going to hang out at the Social Wednesday night, the 14th of September. He's nice enough to twist his schedule up to do that, and he's kicking off the event with us Wednesday morning. Guys, I don't want to spend the whole time about the event, but indirectly, this is all about the event because Dave's going to bring it. So Dave, welcome, buddy. I could go on for a half hour for an intro. We'll be out of time. Thanks, buddy, for coming.
Love it, Chris. Crazy. Like, you're probably my best friend that I haven't met in person, which seems weird when you said that. I had to think about it. Like, yeah, you're right. Crazy.
I felt like we had until my wife asked me last night, who is he? I said, yeah, that's right. You haven't met him.
Yeah, some random stranger. Hey, but I do hear from everybody I talk to that I'm talking about coming to Bridgeport, Rhode Island, that it is one of the most incredible cities in the United States, which is unbeknownst to me. I didn't know it was that amazing. I've been looking, me and my wife have been looking up pictures, and dude, I'm excited, very excited.
Good time to be here because the tourists go home, which I celebrate, and it's nice to be around. If you're into boating, side note, the third biggest boat show in the country is that following weekend. You might be around still if you're hanging out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would love to meet you guys all in person. I know you guys have a great lineup and a great whole plethora of events going. But if you come out there, man, I would love to get some sit down time with all of you guys. Maybe go for a walk on the water out there. Just soak it all in together. So please come out if you're around.
I look forward to it. And I'm going to give you guys all, if you don't have a ticket yet, guys, if you haven't seen us promote it by the end of the thing, or maybe Pete, just chuck it in the chat right now for the $20 ticket, live 20 / live 20. So Dave, just for some backstory, because I don't know if they heard your episode, you've been on my podcast 3 times. I encourage you all to go listen to those later, but tell me, I thought of this today before coming on to get them in your brain. Tell me what, like some aha moments or an hour with one of your high paid NBA players looks like from a mindset standpoint. Like, why would they hire you? Like, what goes on there? I was thinking about this today. Is that a cool question? Is that all right?
Totally cool question. Yeah.
Okay.
So the whole thing that I do with NBA players and coaches and CEOs is you map out a plan, a guide for a plan. Everybody on this call has a vision for where you want to get to. Hopefully you do. Visions are incredibly hard to actualize unless you have goals, unless you have steps to get there. And I'm a firm believer that if you create this vision, and this can be a wildly massive, just obtaining wealth, whatever you want your rich life to look like. And that's another thing that I tell these players and people that I work with, making a lot of money is not a bad thing. Some people feel bad if they make a lot of money. Why? When you make a lot of money, then you have the opportunity to go do a lot more things with your money for good. So the whole mindset shift of, all right, this player wants to, take for an example an NBA player that I've worked with, Domantas Sabonis, and he timidly said he wanted to be an NBA All-Star at the start. Like, no, if you want to be an NBA All-Star, there's ways to do this. You're in the NBA, you can absolutely make it happen. For all of you guys, if you want to have a whatever it might be, certain amount of revenue coming in every month from real estate, make it happen. So you set this ultimate vision, and you notice I don't call the vision a goal. Goals are just mile markers to lead to the vision, because everybody wants happiness. And I'll go on some tangents and I'll wrap it back up, don't worry, as far as a step-by-step thing. So everybody wants happiness, right? I assume. But what is happiness? Happiness is fulfillment. That's literally feeling fulfilled. But how do you achieve fulfillment? The way you achieve fulfillment is being on a constant growth, constant stretching, constant learning, something that you wake up excited about. You know, those days that you want to do what you're doing more is something that you are excited about. And the only way to do that is take action. The only way to take action is to have a formulaic plan. So with an NBA player, we'll look at what is his vision. All right, okay, what are the goals for this year? How are we going to achieve those goals? Let's say it's an NBA All-Star. Okay, a player that I'm working with this year, Gordon Hayward. We're doing the same thing for that. Now we got to figure out in that goal of an NBA All-Star and an All-Pro, how is he going to get to that level? How is he going to get to that point? It's going to be his system, who he is. So if you just say NBA All-Star, you say, man, all these points per game, or you just say, oh, I want to make 30,000 a month, 50,000 a month, like cool, but now how are you going to do it? And that's the system. So knowing who you are, knowing who Gordon is, what he does better than anybody else in the NBA. He's a very versatile slasher. So he's going to work on his slashing. Every single day he's going to work on slashing, getting to the hoop. What is your strength skill? What is that thing that's going to make you better than anybody else? That's your system. So you see, I'm taking, instead of focusing on results, which most people do, which are numbers, which are stats, which is the financial bottom line, and taking it back to system. What's your system? Okay? So once you know what you do better than everybody else, like I know if I'm doing something in, like business-wise, I'm going to go sell. I have a gift to be able to sell, to be able to talk to people, and I'm going to really hone in on that. And I'm going to keep working on that. And I'm going to keep working on that, making the best it can possibly be in my messaging. So the system process is the daily habits. So what daily habits are you doing that are going to lead to this big yearly goal and ultimately this vision that you have? What are the daily habits that you're implementing? For Gordon Hayward and his slashing ability. Okay, he's watching film on other players who might be better than him at that. Luka Doncic, if you know the NBA. So he's studying the other guys. What are they doing at such a high level? Oh, that's the footwork he's doing? Okay, I'm going to go work on that. You guys are studying Chris, studying whoever's at the top of the game. Oh, well, that's how he did it? Okay, then I can too. And the great thing about the world that we live in now, everything's on YouTube or a podcast. Like, it's all out there. If you want the education, the step-by-step process, it's all out there. So think about what are the things you can be doing on a daily basis that's going to lead you to that goal. Maybe it's just discipline in the way that you train your body, because your body's obviously connected with your mind. Maybe it's the way your whole lifestyle, your habits, you set your success habits up. So know who you are, your system, and your process, the habits. That's when results happen. So that's kind of an overview of how I do it with the players. Each week we'll have a focus. So each week we'll have a big 3 focus. So I'll ask them at the start of the week, hey, what are the 3 things that you want to accomplish so at the end of the week, you're going to feel like you move the needle forward? And so this is another miniature goal, these micro goals for the macro. So they'll send me over 3 things. So I'd ask you guys that question starting on Monday. What are 3 things that you want to take a step forward? It can be a small step forward, but you know it's moving the needle towards who you want to be in your goals. And then at the end of the week, I check in with them. All right, did you accomplish these? If not, no big deal. We'll move them to the next week, but then you'll be able to assess, well, why didn't I get these done? Did I just say that and I was just lazy? Because there's a huge, the biggest disconnect that there ever is the knowledge versus action. Ideas versus action. Everybody has that. Hardly anybody has this, the actual taking action of it. So the big 3 is a massive one that I do. And see, I was seeing everybody there for a second. I liked seeing everybody. I got moved to a different, now I'm looking at myself. That's okay.
We just put you on the spotlight. What we can do.
Now I really got to make sure my hair looks good.
V or Kristen, if you could just do pin and not spotlight, that way he can interact with the energy. Pin is good.
That's all good. So yeah, the big 3 is one of them that I do, and then it's really assessing like what area that each of these players needs to really specifically focus on. So if it's a focus of confidence, it's going to be a lot of things that I'm giving them, confidence tools that I'm giving them. It's one of my favorite ones is actually so I love to say, hey, go get these books, go check these books out. But if you want a really good book, Atomic Habits, I know like a lot of you read it, but read it again. It's actually that good. That's why it sold millions and millions of copies. I wanted to be one, as an author, I wanted to be like, well, I'll pick some holes in this, but there's really not. So one of the main things that he talks about is every single day voting for the type of person you want to be. So if you want to get in great shape, you say, I am the type of person who goes to the gym. If you want to make a lot of money, I am the type of person who is financially wealthy. I am the type of person, like, make these votes in the morning, daily votes. This will help your confidence, as our brains are 95% neuroplastic. 95% neuroplastic means neuroplasticity is the changing ability of your brain. Your brain matures at the age of 26, but matures in finality is completely two different things. So you can change the chemistry in your brain by the way that you speak to yourself. So, okay, I think that gives you some things.
Great kickoff. Dave, I know you could do this for 3 hours and not and
Totally.
be high energy. Okay, I know I have some questions. I wrote down 3 while you were talking, but then I'd feel like we're on our 4th podcast interview and no one else was interacting. So I wanted to ask if you, anyone, but I know some of the coaches that are on told me they had questions. So if anyone has questions, unmute. And I appreciate everybody being muted. That was actually good for 100 people being on air. Does anyone have any questions for David? Why don't you raise your hand and we'll go that way. Use the emoji to raise your hand instead of everybody unmuting at once. Steven, you're up, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me, and good to talk to everybody. David, you mentioned in there as far as finding your particular strength and basically capitalizing on that. What is it that you do better than us? What do you recommend people to do in order to find that? Because maybe that's not as obvious for some people. What do they, what kind of things should they do in order to find that?
Awesome question. If I'm hearing you right, you're saying, how do you find that particular strength that you should be focusing on?
Yes.
Great. Well, whatever you're doing it right if you're on the beach there in Hawaii. So you found your strength. No, first of all, think about the things that you really enjoy doing, because you're only going to do something long term if you actually enjoy it, if you're passionate about it. I know that sounds like a cliche answer, but it's a very important piece of it. And then ask people around you, ask people that you trust. There's a lot of times, like, even when I'm working on this next book here, I think all this stuff is really good on it, but then I ask my trusted circle of people that I know are going to give me the truth. They're not just going to say, oh, you're good at everything. Like, don't ask your mom or whatever, your relative. Like, they're going to tell you that. It's the whole American Idol complex. Ask the people in your life that will challenge and support you and see what they say. Like, well, when you think of me, like, what comes up? And then also, too, like, if you can combine those two things with a definite felt need and opening a gap somewhere in the market that you can see, like, okay, well, there's not really many people doing this, or this is like, people that come to me with questions are always asking what. And that's a big thing that I find, like, with when I'm continuing trying to refine a message of a book of, like, okay, well, what are people struggling with? What do people actually want to hear? Because a lot of the times what I want to tell them is not necessarily what they want to hear. And especially more power to you too if you've created something that you can literally say, well, here's how I did it, and here's the steps. People want to know the hows. They want to know the tools. So long-winded answer there too. Again, I apologize, but the passion, there's something that you know that you're excited about doing, and you don't have to worry about too. Like, it's like people are like, well, what if this isn't my passion my whole life? What? How would you know? Do it, right? Like, you're not going to know what you want to do when you're 72 years old. Just do it. Ask the trusted people around you what you do best, what they see in you, and then ask people questions too, like, well, what do you need? What is that void that you can fill? And now those should really kind of help you get to that strength.
Thanks a lot.
And Steven, just a thought, like, and I think some of the coaches here will agree with me, because you're a coach with PD. If you looked at your students, I'll ask you, but I'm willing to bet if you looked at your students, you'd go, yeah, that's their strength. Yeah, this one here, that's it. Is that a fair statement with your students?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you go to people like Peter V, and you go to people outside of a financial tie who have just, and you ask them, and they'll probably, to David's point, pinpoint it for you.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Let's see, we're in order here. Jose, you are up, my man.
Yes, sir. Hey, David, I've got a question for you. How important is it to have a battle buddy that understands your mindset of what you're going through, to share the ups and downs as you're going through it? Men have a tendency of wanting to do things alone, but to have a battle buddy when you're going to battle that understands exactly what you're going through, to be able to exchange ideas and help him when you're up or when he's down, and vice versa. How important is that?
Man, the way that you asked that question, I feel like you know the answer to that. And I like the terminology, battle buddy. I've never heard it, but it's extremely important. Like I can just give you by example of going and speaking to different places and corporations and companies. John Gordon is that for me. Like we'll share ideas, we'll talk to each other, we'll encourage each other when it's
Right,
been long travel. I mean, we'll like that helps a ton.
right,
Nobody can do it alone. I mean, no one was created to do anything alone. You can't achieve anything great alone, nor can you become the best version of yourself
no,
alone. So, battle buddy, love the term, super important.
right. Thank you.
Awesome. Jose, awesome. Dave, I'm going to insert one here
Sure.
because Stephen reminded me of it just because he's in that group. I was speaking with Peter this morning, Peter Vexelman, and he's been at real estate as long as me, Dave, right? A few decades. And he said to me, like he was jumping through the phone in excitement. I was telling Zach this today about creative real estate, the timing of it. And I'm thinking of what Jose asked. I'm thinking to myself, okay, so if I hang out with them, so I know that's true. But what do these guys do when you leave the circle of whether it's intentional or not, but you leave that circle who knows this niche and you go outside and you get the media screaming and a bunch of crap going on because that's the news. So I'm not talking about just real estate, but relative to that, how do they deal with that? Or how do they block that or anything related to that? Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, a lot of thoughts on that actually. So, even to that point that you're making right there, if just a generally accepted thing that I've always lived by, if everybody's screaming one thing, especially if the news is screaming one thing or the masses are screaming one thing,
Yeah,
you should go the other way.
correct.
Because there's always some kind of like driven agenda behind it, and you always got to think. I think my dad told me this quote probably when I was like 6 years old, which is kind of funny, but he said the masses are the asses, like they're the dumb ones, so don't go with them. So if people are saying like, oh, the world's ending, that's when I'm going to start investing more because I know there's going to be more opportunities. So I kind of look at the news and look at the media for what I should be doing the complete opposite. Like even in like I'll take it in a couple different ways. Like even in the health and wellness and diet industry, there was just a recent study that came out of Tufts University. It was telling like it was like a 3-year study with which foods are the best overall complex for you, like the best bang for your buck in every area. And Honey Nut Cheerios was like number 2. Okay, tell me that General Mills doesn't have something behind it. So why am I
That's
going to
crazy.
listen to that?
Crazy.
And it's the same thing with NBA players. I tell them all this, the same thing. I've gone through literally with all of them. If someone in the media, in the news, is saying, "Oh, Gordon Hayward, you're washed up. You're not any good anymore. Any of this," you know where that guy's going? That guy's probably still living with his mom, making 25,000 a year. Like he has never played basketball in his life. Like, he has like, and that's the guy that's coming at him. So
Yeah.
I tell go like think about that. Like, does he have jurisdiction and validation over what you've done your entire life? Has he been with you every step of the way, 24/7? No, because I think that's a huge debilitator for people too. Is like if somebody says something negative to them, they think about it the other person for about 10 seconds. We think about it for the rest of the day. It basically eats up our day. What is it? 86,400 seconds in a day. So we think about it for 86,390 or whatever that math is.
Yeah.
You let it consume you. I'm also a big believer in. I love when negative. Now, don't take this too far. Like when we do the talk, I don't want a whole lot of negative feedback. All right, but I like when it's on the social media stuff and like because it shows that you're doing something. If somebody actually has enough time to say, "Man, that was so bad," blah blah blah, like, well, that means I'm doing something because a lot of people are taking notice. So I like to spin everything the opposite way, because usually the opposite way in every aspect is the right way, both personally and for generality news.
Yeah, and I'd ask you guys all, and then we'll go back to questions. We'll go to Steve. I'd ask you guys all to think about who matters to you and what matters, because do 98% of the people out there do whatever it takes for however long it takes every day, no matter how hard it is, to accomplish all their goals? No, they don't. To David's point of the master, they just don't. So think about who matters to you and focus on that. Steve, you're up, buddy.
Yeah, David, glad to be here. What an opportunity to be able to speak to you here. Quick question to you. Being around like the highest level NBA players, what kind of disciplines or mindset issues have you seen as like a pattern that you see them kind of run into, even at the highest level?
You talking like what kind of flaws in their discipline, where they're hampered at?
Yeah, it could be like more or less like the, well, I don't know if it's necessarily motivations, or obviously they're at the highest level, but I'm sure they still struggle internally with very similar everyday people, right?
Yeah, I mean they all struggle. Everybody to some extent struggles with the boring, and the boring is 85% of our days. The boring is the monotonous, just those habits that you have to do. But I tell the players, like, if you get great at the boring, if you look at the boring and know that, you know what, everybody's going to shy away from the boring. They're going to go watch Netflix. They're going to go make some excuse because it's boring or something. But if you're the one who says, you know what, I love the boring. I love these mundane days. I love the Tuesdays that get no flair to them. Like, that's going to make you great. So we implement that mindset into them, so they take away that monotony is boring. But also the ones that, like, motivation is fleeting. Motivation is very fleeting. Like, even I'll tell you at the talk, motivation is 5% of it all. The 95% is what you decide to do. Intrinsically, you're always going to be more motivated than extrinsically, because once you get something extrinsically, you're going to want something more, and you're going to want something more, and those are good carrots to have out there. But it's not the motivation for these guys. It's insatiable drive, which that's the term that I use for the guys. I can tell you within the first 5 minutes of working with somebody on court if they have the potential and they're going to actualize the potential of being great, because they want to be out there. It's the guys out here in the off season right now that are playing in these pickup runs that aren't the ones that are seen all over social media, because they don't care about that. It's the guys who just signed $50 million contracts that are waking up at 6 a.m. and they're going to the gym because they love it. They love the process of it. And a friend of mine is B.J. Armstrong, who was the point guard for Michael Jordan's Bulls teams. And he told me, like, we've gone back and forth on why. Like, I try to pick his brain all the time on, like, why is Jordan so great? What is his thing? Like, what was it? And he always just keeps coming back to it. He's like, David, he just loves competition. Loves competition. More so, everybody thinks Jordan hates to lose. Yeah, a lot of people hate to lose or likes to win. No, he just enjoys competition. And I think that's the beauty of it. The ones that are great, the ones that succeed, are the ones who absolutely enjoy the competition. And when I say that too, like, competition can mean different things also. Competition does not mean that I'm competing with every single one of you for a slice of the pie. Competition means I'm competing with myself daily, and it also means I'm competing with other people. When you get that down, like, I had to make that decision too. Like, I realized, like, these guys that I'm competing against, why am I competing against them? Why don't we join forces and make something even bigger and better, and then I'll get more battle buddies that I can compete with. So, yeah, they struggle from the same things everybody else does, but it's just their level of discipline that separates them from everybody else also. And as we're on these, I feel like we're kind of on a kick of, like, changing how words are and different definitions. Discipline is always a scary word for people too, because they think it has to be so regimented and structured. The more disciplined you are, the more freedom you will have, because you can build in your freedom. If you're sporadic and you have no discipline, then you ultimately have no freedom.
You brought up Michael Jordan. I'll back up and say the boring, Steve, and everybody, the boring is the dials. Mm-hmm. I remember late 90s, so I'm going to date myself a little bit. I would use Michael Jordan's quote. It surrounds itself around repetitious boredom. I don't remember it, but I would while the phone was dialing on a double headset, I'd be writing repetitious boredom, because it was that brutal. But that's what built everything that now is a foundation. Repetitious boredom. Mr. Kyle.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Dave.
I think that's so important. Like, I think that point that he made, don't let that slip by the wayside. Because I know personally, everything that I've ever done, like getting to a higher level, was because of that. Sending out letters, handwritten letters to every NBA GM. Even just recently, I'm giving a TED Talk in October in New York. I've been trying to work on a TED Talk for a long time. You know how many messages I've sent out to TED hosts? And the one guy got to me. He loved the concept of it. Even got on a call and said, hey, look, we don't do this. We actually discourage people reaching out. We don't even want that. But, so there you go. Like, it just takes that one. And you might not know. Like, you might be 2 calls away from a massive deal, but you've already made 44 calls and you're like, well, what's the 46th one actually really going to do? So I think that point, Chris, is very, very powerful.
Love it. And I remember reading that in your Pivot and Go, all the letters you wrote. See that people don't see that. You can read the book and know it, but they don't see that. Mr. Kyle, you're up, buddy.
Right on. Hey, David. Hey, when you have an athlete that say is having some like a low point or not performing real well, having some bad games there, is there something you do with them, or like a mind shift shift that you create so they go into each game thinking that they're the best, I'm a winner, I can make this happen?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's a lot of things with that, but the first one that I do with them all the time is let them accept it. I think the worst thing that you can do is just slap a positive Band-Aid on something. Everybody talks about positivity, and I love positivity, but until you actually accept the negative part of it, accept the down part of it, appreciate it for what it is, because with those, the only way you're going to have higher highs in the positive, because the thing about it, if you won, the winning would get kind of old, right? But when you feel that and you actually sit in it, and I sit with them and I feel it with them, and then that's way, then you can get to the positive. Then you can get to that part. And then I'll ask them questions like, hey, 100 years from now, I'd love to ask this one, is anybody going to remember any of us here? No. So what's the big, like, why is the big stress? It's so hard. If you can name your great-great-grandparent, I'd be very impressed. If you can name someone 100 years ago, if you can name more than 5 people 100 years ago, I'd be very impressed. Yeah, start thinking of it. It's tough. So it's not that big of a deal. And I'll teach them in a way to laugh at themselves. Because one of the biggest debilitators to what you are able to do is when you start pressing. And this is going 100%. I think the sweet spot's at 90%. If you try too hard, you're going to try too hard. It's like if you just meet a really good looking girl at the bar or something or somewhere, and then you're just texting and calling and, man, you want this so bad. Hey, I'm going to be the best husband ever. You don't even know, I'm going to be so good. That's pressing. That's going a little bit too far. The flow zone, the flow state is at the 90%. So, yeah, first off, just accept the negative for what it is and laugh at yourself, realize this isn't as big a deal as it is, and then you can start building on the positive. And you can build on the positive of having them watch. I'm a big believer in visually watching their personal highlight reel, like actively watching the clips. Or if you don't have clips of yourself doing something, the visualization is very powerful. But when I say that too, understand that when I say visualization, most people, you see a snapshot. All you see is a snapshot. Think about what camera angle you're watching yourself in. So if they're stepping on court as the example we're using, I'm asking them questions. Well, what camera lens are you watching? From the crowd? From your eyes? From the defender? From behind the hoop? And then it makes it more real. And then you keep asking questions. Or you can keep asking yourself that question. Let's say you are about to walk into a room and you're going to make a deal with somebody, some kind of shaking the hands. That's the final thing you want to get to, shaking the hands. So you're watching yourself, you open the door, pick your camera angle. Okay, what type of texture is that doorknob? What kind of aroma do you smell when you walk into this house? Point being, the more detailed you can get, the more real it actually becomes. So the visualization tactic, the voting for yourself, the writing down the votes for yourself is very powerful. There's a whole lot of positive ones. There's one that I just used with a guy who actually was a college basketball player last year, and he really embraced this one. And I mean, obviously he's a very talented player, but he got drafted 4th in the NBA this year. It's called The Alter Ego. You might have heard that book, The Alter Ego, but it's just giving yourself permission to be a different person when you step into the battlefield. So I have them pick their favorite superhero, who that is. They embody them, and then they'll also put something on them. Like if you see a wristband one of my players are wearing or something, like that is the power that when they step on there. So you could have that specific something. You might call it a good luck charm or whatever, but if it's the alter ego, when I place this wristband on, I know when I go on the court, I'm confident, unshakable. Another one is a cue word. A cue word is a word that you can say at any time that's going to bring you back. It's a trigger. It could be a snapping of the fingers, an actionable trigger, or a cue word. One of my players for the Clippers, his is unshakable. He sent me a text message. He's been using this for years. You might have to change it at times, keep it fresh, but he's been using this one for years. He sends me a text message a couple weeks ago of his arm with a whole tattoo that says unshakable. He's like, I'm not going to forget it. Like, okay, that's going a little over the top, but hey, we'll take it.
Whatever works, right?
Whatever works.
I want to, Dave, this is awesome stuff. We're going to keep rolling, but there's about 40 people that came on since I said this. So for those of you that are on here and you're not going to get a chance to ask Dave a question, Dave is going to be not only the keynote Wednesday morning, the 14th of September, but also hanging out with us at the VIP social Wednesday night. VIP ticket gets you in that social and gets you in the associate only Dev Day Friday. I'll tell all of you guys, I can say this every day, and I'll still have people that don't take action on this. He talked about action earlier. If you went to the social and you went to the associate Dev Day with your VIP ticket, you paid for your event thousands fold. Because one conversation that Dave has with you, or one conversation that my equity partner has with you, one conversation that Brian or Russ or the other coaches have with you is a game changer. So for 40 or 50 that came on a little bit later, I want you to make sure you understood that that's what's going on. And you can get a $20 ticket, which is kind of a joke. And the links the team will put up are at smartrealestatecoach.com/live20 because you're on this event. Brian, you're awesome. Go ahead, buddy.
Thank you. I would expand on that and say you're probably going to pay for the next 5 to 10 years of your life getting in that room.
Yep.
I had like 3 or 4 questions. They all got answered. So I just have a general comment here for the group. And that is, I've been with the group for almost 3 years now. David, I've heard you speak many times. I've read both of your books, and the first 5 minutes of your talk was the most value I've got from you ever. So I appreciate that. You're obviously growing as a person as well, and I'm just encouraging everyone to do yourself a favor and come to the event, because this is the type of stuff that happens.
Brian,
Thanks,
you're
Mr.
awesome,
Brian.
man. You're awesome. I want to speak on those 2 points real quick. One, the first 5 minutes, hopefully the last 55 minutes were good too. But hey,
Sure.
Continuing to get deeper and deeper. And if you guys like any of these kind of tools, like in the talk, we actually show you how to apply them in your life. So this is kind of, just kind of the broad end of it. But Chris, in $20 ticket, like, isn't it funny? Like when I talked about the people watching the news and listening to the news, people will see a price value and think, well, what's my ROI? What's my financial ROI to a $20 ticket? The ROI to anything is just unsurmountably huge if you are investing in yourself. $20 ticket is just like ridiculous as it is. That's a coffee in LA. But don't look at things in ROIs when it could be a conversation one of you guys have with each other that ends up being the most powerful thing in a long-standing relationship that you guys grow massive business together. That doesn't happen on a Zoom, by the way.
I'll give you a quick example. You just sparked it, David. Every year I can attribute a conversation with a mentor or a happenstance conversation with someone like Dave. Off air, we're done the podcast, we're just chit-chatting. The associate program today, and probably many people don't know this, used to be called the JV program. And the JV program came about from a conversation in a conference room with one gentleman in Florida for about 6 minutes. He matter of factly said, why don't you just do this? And I said, oh, that's a cool idea. And then playing on the way home, this was created. So I can't tell you enough, like what Brian and Dave just said. I promise you, you will leave the event and your life will change. But I understand some of you got to make sacrifices to get there. I totally get that. That was me when I was broke after the crash. I get that, but I found a way to do it. I borrowed, I freaking drove, whatever you got to do. I'm telling you, it'd be worth it. Mr. Russ.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, for showing up. So I'm sure you've gone through many athletes that get frustrated with not seeing results, right? I've gone through that many times as well. What kind of mindset shifts when you see a player, you know, because it's a gratification world, right? Many players probably want to see improvement right away from what you're trying to describe to them. They don't see that improvement right away. What kind of mindset shifts or what kind of things do you kind of promote to them to kind of get them back on track?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, it's not just for players. Obviously, all these are just very relatable to everybody. But momentum is huge. Positive momentum with seeing some success is very, very important. And if you're beating your head against the wall and you're frustrated and you're not getting anything back from the results basis to build that momentum, it's two things. One, you can look at some kind of different metric, because right now, whatever you are judging your success on, and it's frustrating, you're not getting it, but maybe there's a different metric in there that you can gain some of this momentum, because sometimes it just takes a spark. It's literally the two rocks hitting together, and just that instant moment, it creates that spark and that fire. So you can get that fire, that flame from somewhere else to spark what you're going at. Now, the next question is, well, is your system and your process, is that broken? You're not getting the results you're looking for, and it goes back to what we talked about. Well, what are you focusing on? What are you doing on a daily basis? Is there something that you can change in that system and process? Like, are you actually doing the wrong thing? Maybe you are. Maybe you're meant for something else. And then it comes down to, okay, if you're frustrated doing it this way, can you partner with somebody else? Can you, like Chris said, can you go get outside help? Can you go get a mentor? Sometimes for me, like, it's been just asking one of my friends a question that literally just changed the whole shift of it, because I'm so in it. We're all so in our own life that it's hard to see it from a different way, because you're going through your life. But then it comes completely clear and obvious when a coach or a mentor or a friend is like, hey, well, actually just look at it this way. Like, dang, man, I've been doing 2 years of the same thing, and that's all I needed. So, and then to the fourth point of this, if all of that is not working and you're not finding any success from any of those, then it's time to think like, okay, well, maybe there's something else that I can be doing. And not looking at it as a loss. The only depreciated time that you have is time that's wasted. It's never wasted if you're trying to go for something, if you're trying to build yourself, and all those skills that, like, tell the story, all the skills that I learned through playing and pouring into myself and trying to be an NBA player, even though I didn't come close to it really, was then I could teach NBA players. So everything you're pouring into something is not a lost value, but it's a value add to something that you might do from there. So hopefully
really cool tie, Dave, at the end with you. I mean, that's just incredible stuff.
Well, most people look at it like if they have to move on to something else, and I'm not saying that's the thing. I mean, that's like down the line to do it. But even if it ever came down to that, you've already developed so many skills doing this thing that these skill sets, these attributes that you developed, will help you in something else. It's not like they're all just gone.
This is real similar, and then we'll go to Brian's question and we'll try to wrap up. This is real similar. You just sparked this thought to Dave. I get calls, sadly, every week from people that, I know there's people on here that have been through this, that people have sadly bought courses from people who not market courses to them, in our space, that then leave them hanging. And so they come to the table with us and they finally find us. One day we'll be well known. They finally find us and they say, I spent X amount. And sometimes X is like 6 figures, 100 grand. And I haven't done a deal yet. Or 10 grand is a lot for some people, and I haven't done a deal yet. And it's similar. And I say, look, there's something in there you picked up, the vernacular, the something, the energy, there's something will come up later. You got to wipe the slate clean, right? You got to just not forget, but you got to wipe the slate clean and move on.
So good.
Not beat yourself up.
You don't have to forget, just forgive yourself, but you don't have to forget. Yeah. Good.
Love it. Brian, sorry, buddy, make you wait.
Hey, no worries. Yeah, so David, you're talking about weekly needle movers. I'm sure that's kind of like a fundamental of yours. What other fundamentals do you practice or coach others to focus on?
Yeah, super good. So weekly needle movers, daily. I like to work in threes. Threes kind of like the number that people are able to kind of conceptualize there. So daily, what am I focused on? So at the end of my day, I think the evening routine is so important to the morning routine. People have made those so like crazy and making money from them because you have to do this, or this. No, mine are pretty basic. Like in the evening, I'm going to know exactly what those three things I want to focus on for the next day are. So I don't go into the next day thinking, well, all right, well, what I got to do? What am I looking like? So you already have that structured out. I think it's very important to have your own self-assessment. So also at the end of the day, whenever I've decided it is what me and my wife call closing time, we're going to tell each other, okay, here's when we're going to put our phones on airplane mode or just on silent so we can actually spend time together. I think this part is so overlooked in the whole business, get it, grind it mode of the recovery, the recharge of how much that's needed, the intentional time. If you have kids, a spouse, like we'll put down a time, we'll agree on it. And this is the time, okay, well, we're not going to sit with each other on the couch if we're watching a movie and be scrolling through Instagram or texting people. That's not intentional time. So we make sure that we're able to do that. I think it's very important to recharge every day at some point. Obviously, it's going to be less of a time, but also like once a week. I found myself, and I know this is biblical, of the Sabbath and the 6 days. God spent 6 days instead of 7 days to create the earth. But anytime that I keep going like 7 days, like I'm like, wow, I'm burnt out. Even my next week just sucks because I'm burnt out. But when I have that one day where I'm not working, I'm just recharging, man, my next week is on fire. I look forward to that day. It's just creating this whole rhythm. And then also making sure you assess yourself. So at the end of the day, I spend 5 minutes and I'll look back at the day. Well, what went right? What were the wins? I'll even do a thing, I think I have it here. Like, this is something I use with my NBA players. It's a whiteboard, and I have them write out what their wins are, what their losses are. So they see it, so they assess it, and then erase the losses. So you've accepted the negative, like we talked about, but you don't have to live in the negative. So they'll erase the negative. So at the end of each day, so now I have this tally, this whole tallies. You can just make a tally if you want, but even more so, you'll have this whole string on this marker board or this journal be all the little wins that you had. Like if I asked you, what was your little win from May 18th of this year? No idea, right? Because we can't remember that stuff. But if you write that down and then you look back at it, you can see this progress that you've made, which is incredible. So these assessments at the end of the day, I have an assessment at the end of each week, which is more of an hour on a Friday, sometimes 2 hours, where I'm assessing it and I'm game playing it to the next one. At the end of each month, I'll take a half a day. And at the end of 3 months, I'll usually take a full day or a couple days where it's going to be more of the creative thinking, the assessing that quarter. How can I get better for the next quarter? Because if you just keep going and going and going and going, you'll burn out and you'll be on the hamster wheel and you'll never have time to actually think. And then you'll never have time to actually create the things you really want to do. So those are a few.
Helpful, Brian?
Helpful?
Oh yeah, I got a bunch of stuff there. Thank you.
Cool.
I see people scribbling. Guys,
By
I
the
think
way,
Go ahead,
Chris, sorry, Dave, the last 5 minutes were better than the first 5 minutes. So
Yes. See, I'm making that down on my tallies. I'm going to say that. Brian told me I did better at the end.
Good stuff. Dave, we just sucked up 45 minutes of your time. I really appreciate you as always. Anything else you want to add to why they should get their butts in the seats, at least to see you in the morning and the afternoon of Wednesday?
Man, if you like, it's first of all, the $20 is just the most ridiculous thing, and that's an absolute steal. I mean, I would just say come out so we can meet each other in person. I love meeting people. I love relationships. But I don't even think, like, Chris, this is one that, like, you don't even have to sell it.
No.
Just like if you don't come, if you're interested in real estate and you don't come and you're like, maybe, I mean, if you live within the vicinity or even fly into it, it's going to be worth it. So I got no sales pitch. It's just kind of a
Love it.
number.
Well, you know what's neat, and not surprising to me actually, but I think every single person that raised their hand, and there's 100 people, there was 110. Every single person was an immersion or a high six associate, the highest two levels of the company. Now some people might be intimidated. I get it, but you won't be in person because everybody's hugging and holding hands and being the same level. But it's not coincidental to me that those people raise their hand, David. They're committed, they're serious, and they've raised their hand more than once. That this is not a surprise to me today.
Yeah, it's a great turnout. It's awesome. Russell, was that your May 18th? I just saw in the chat, by the way.
Yes, sir.
Okay, there you go.
We post them every day. So
I love it.
Dave, Russ coaches basketball. How many years, Russ?
30.
All right.
I've asked David this question before. My question was, if you're up 3 with 5 seconds left and you have a foul to give, do you foul?
Absolutely, 100%. You foul and you don't foul where they're anywhere close to shooting a 3. I've had personal experience with that. Yeah, totally, you foul.
Now, Chris probably thinks that was foreign language. You probably had no idea.
Well, I don't think. I know it is. If you want to talk hockey, we'll do that when Dave comes down.